So today what you're going to see is about based on Bitcoin transactions and their working. So first of all, we have to know what do you mean by Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency. So that works without a central authority. So there will be no banks and no uh, other central authorities will be there. So what? So it is truly based on blockchain cryptography and peer-to-peer network and consists of the proof of work. Okay, so next we are going to be about the components of an Bitcoin. So what are the components that Bitcoin will have is like based on the wallet that is the. So what do you mean by the wallet? It is nothing but consisting of a private key and a public key. So the transactions, and it consists of a block and a miner and the blockchain architecture, and consists of a network nodes. Okay, so now we are going to view about the working of a Bitcoin transactions. So first of all, we have to know how the transaction is happening out here. Okay, so basically the transaction is the fundamental building block of a Bitcoin blockchain. So what it will do is like you are going to transfer some amount, and what it will do is it will consist of some operations that will have some private key and public key. And what it do is like secure your transaction and using the cryptographic algorithms and encryption techniques. Okay, so here that how the transaction has happened is like that. So the transaction is simple, and by sending some bitcoins and bitcoin addresses are quite, it can be quite complex depending on their requirements. Okay, so for each transaction is that the it is being composed or at least for one input and the output. Okay, so the input can be thought as in the coins being spent that have been created in the previous transaction, and our output being output is being created. Okay, so what it will do is like it will spoof out that uh, ID, and it is being created by itself, and what it will do is like it will do some hash value functions and transfer them. Uh, so coming back. So next, how this transaction is being happened. So if a transaction is minting into new coins, and if there is no input and there is no signatures needed. Okay. So for an instance, if a transaction is to send to sends the coins from some other users. So for an instance, we can say Bitcoin address. Then it needs to be signed by the sender with their private key. So what it will do, so basically, you will have some ID, and they will create a private key according to that encryption techniques, and they will have some addresses into it. So by the means of it, it will have some references if that is satisfied with that sender and the receiver by the means of acknowledgement, and it will send out that with the reference, and the previous transaction and their order is basically what it will do is like it will check out the each transaction, and then it is mapped towards the next transaction, and you will spend some amounts. Okay, if that is there is no sign of a transaction, for an instance here as you can see, for it is considered as an unspent transaction outputs, UTFO. Okay, sorry, UTFO, unspent transaction output, that is represented by the Satoshi Nakamoto. Okay. So here, as I told earlier, the transaction are not encrypted, and the private key is publicly visible in the blockchain. Okay. So what it will do, it made some blocks and made of a transaction, and these can be viewed by the online blockchain explorer. Here the website is given. Kindly check out this. So, as I told you earlier, that Bitcoin is a decentralized trust system. Here, an example scenario, as it is being mentioned, here is for Alice and Bob's scenario. So, what happened is Alice sends in first retail transaction. For an instance, she's buying a cup of coffee from Bob coffee shop. So, Cafe accepts the Bitcoin payments. So, by how it is being sent, by adding the Bitcoin option to its point of to sale system. Okay, then what it is that like the point of sale system automatically converts the total price from the US dollars to a Bitcoin transaction. Okay, as you can see here, the total transaction amount is 1.50 USD, that is converted into 0.15 Bitcoin. Okay, so here as it is being the transaction is sent, and what it is having, so basically it will have some recipient address, the transaction label and the amount, and the miner fee is mentioned out here, and the feedback is there. So they need to send it for sorry, they need to spend this while and it is being authenticated by the system. And what it will do is like it will check whether the transaction is valid or not, and it will be securely transfer the amount. Okay. So as you can see, the Bob's point of sale system create a special QR code containing the payment request. Okay, this will can be created by using by the means of a Bitcoin transaction. So as you can see the diagram here, how the Bitcoin is being transaction here. So as you can see, the Alice was the want to buy the product. As you can see, the Bob to Bitcoin. So how it is being purchased, as you can see, by the means of Bitcoin that is stored in that form of transaction blocks. So it is being bundled into a block of each transaction. So what it will do, this will broadcast to all the mining nodes into the network. And what it is does, the network nodes, as you can see here, the network nodes are validating the each Alice transaction by using the algorithms in a process that is called a mining. Okay, so then what it is being done, it checks the so what it will do, the mining the process with validated by the miners. So first, as you can see, the first miner will validate a new block whether it is blockchain receive the portion of a Bitcoin as a reward. Okay, either it is being received, the transaction is sent the request as a complete one, and it is being sent towards the Bob side. Okay, this is how the miner block it is being worked. Okay, so as you can see here, yeah, how the transaction that so being happened and how it is being secured. So here the transaction tells the network of the owner of some Bitcoin value has been authorized by the other party, and as it is being by it is being it is being authorized by the transfer of the value that to the another owner. Okay, so what is happening out here, the new owner can spend now the Bitcoin by creating another transaction, and that is being authorized by the transfer of another owner, so on. So this is called a chain of ownership. Okay, so here the instance is being worked like this. So how the transaction blocks are being stored by using the ledger technology, as it is being mentioned in the lines. As you can see, for the input one, it is being spent the one Bitcoin value, and the second value is being spent, and as a total output, you can see $0.5. So what it is means like it is the difference that is the miner is getting the zero point 0.5 value Bitcoin for their sake for the verification process. Okay, so here as you can see, the each transaction contains one or more inputs which are like a debts against the Bitcoin output. Okay, it is taken as a debt. So for the another side of transaction, there are some more outputs which are likely called as credits that are added to your account. Okay, that is called a Bitcoin account. So you have to know the difference between the input and output, and need not to be same. Okay, the difference between the inputs and outputs, that is considered as a transactional fee. Okay, that 0.5 is considered as a transactional fee. So here it is being mentioned how the chain of transaction is being happened, as I told you earlier. So for instance, here Bob receives an 50 Bitcoin amount. So far he's going to invest in that. So how this transaction being objective is like it is being input is given and output is Bob spent is considered as a zero point 0.5 Bitcoin is to for the Alice, and the 49.5 Bitcoin is to change his address. Okay, as you can see, the Alice what she's going to receive is like zero point 0.5 as an input, and zero point 0.1 from the stranger, and zero point 0.2 as a sister. That will segregate into the blocks, and what will happen, that output is being deployed to that employer. Okay, that the Alice will spins. Okay, this is called the chain of transaction. So how it is being making a change, as you can see, it is being transferred from one inputs to the other output. So that is considered as the output is being transaction from the another transaction ID, that is considered for the Alice. So that is being out that is being transferred to the other output, and Alice input is again coming back to the Bob's. So Bob's receiving some amounts, and he will be going to spend as output, and unspent transaction, as you can see, it is being calculated here. Okay, so how the common transaction forms will occur. So here it is the, as you can see, from one base or multiple blocks of output into a single transaction, or single transaction to multiple funds. Okay, this is called most common transfer one, from the one transfer to two outputs, that is considered as a most common transaction, and the block of inputs and that is being transaction to one in output, that's transactions aggregating, and one grouping output sorry one grouping input equal to multiple number of outputs, that is called transaction distributing forms. Okay, these are the distributing forms. So how the life cycle is being run? So as you can see, the first point, user and the sender sends a transaction using the wallet software or some other interface. Okay, the next, as you can see, the wallet sign the transaction using the sender private key, and so the transaction is broadcast to the Bitcoin network using the flooding algorithm. So what will do? The mining nodes will include the transaction next blocks that is to be mined, and the miners will do what? So miners will resolve the problem and using the proof of work and problem and the broadcast that is newly mined by the block to the network. Okay. So as you can see, the next that's that node will verify the each block that is propagated to the block further, and confirmation starts to regenerate. Okay. So finally, these confirmations start to appear from the receiver's wallet, and after approximately six confirmations, the transaction is completed and it is being finalized as a confirmed one. Okay. So however, the six is just a recommended number. The transaction can be considered final even number, that is after the first confirmation. So the key idea of behind this waiting for six confirmation is that probability of double spending virtually eliminated after six confirmations. Okay. So here the how architecture is shown how the blockchain is work. So for the first, it has request the transaction, and that block is being created and the transaction is being created. So next, it is being connected to a network that is kind of saved as blocks, and it is being segregated to the node value, and it is being very validated by that miners. Next, as you can see, that is receives the nodes from by using the proof of work and the proof of what consensus algorithms. Next, it is being added to the existing blockchain technique, and it is that is considered as a block transaction completed. Okay. So here we can come to know how it is being secured, and by the means of digital signatures, hashing techniques, and the distributed ledgers and immutable blocks. And there's here, because of this, there's no single point of failure. Okay. So advantages of this is no intermediaries. There is no intermediate transaction, intermediate parties here. There's no central authority. So here, as you can see, it is being transparent, secure, and it may be used for global transaction purposes. Okay, some limitations are here. So for example, it is being slow sometimes, and it requires high energy consumption and high volatility. Okay. Uh, so as in the next part, we can conclude how the transaction structure will work, and we can view that on next session. Thank you, and this is signing off from Tilak.